I hope this video clears up one of the most confusing topics of playing the clarinet, and that's what reed strength you should use. In so many of the classes I do and when working with students, I am always getting the question of what reed strength to use. And it really is an important question because it can make a really big difference in how easy it is to play. So if you learn something new about how reeds work or what reed strength you should be using, then be sure to give this video a like so I know that it's being helpful for you. So the really common misconception about reed strength is that you typically start around a 2 when you're a beginner, maybe even lower than that, and you think as you get better and better, you should go up higher and higher in your reed strength. And maybe you even heard of some professionals like Steve Williamson of the Chicago Symphony. He plays on like 5s, so you must be thinking, well, if he's playing on 5s and he's an absolutely fantastic player, then obviously that should be my goal, to try playing on as hard of reeds as possible as well. But it's actually completely not true. The strength of reed that you play on comes down to 2 things. One is very subjective and is just your personal preference and how you like things to feel. And then the other very important, more objective one is your actual mouthpiece. So first, talking about personal preference, some people, just the physics and their anatomy of their face makes it different how they play. Some people like to put a lot of pressure on the reed and have a really strong reed, like Steve Williamson. Some people like to be a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more open, and just let the air do the work and be more relaxed with the embouchure. That's more actually how I personally feel about reeds typically. But in any case, it's what feels comfortable to you. Do you want something that you can really like push into and like blow your brains out all the time? Do you want something that's super responsive, really effortless to play lots of things, but maybe doesn't hold up quite as well when you want to really like blast and have a really good, strong sound? It's sort of somewhat of a trade-off, and a lot of it comes down to just like the actual anatomy of your face and how you're used to playing and what feels comfortable to you. Now, the more concrete side of things is actually your mouthpiece itself. And this is where a lot of beginners can really get in trouble. Oftentimes, beginner setups, the beginner mouthpieces are a little bit more on the open side and work well with a nice soft reed, but then they think, oh, I need to be on harder and harder and harder reeds. And if you're playing a beginner mouthpiece with even like a 3.5, sometimes that can be much too hard for that mouthpiece and cause a lot of struggle. Whereas you're stuck thinking, oh, I'm just not good enough. I need to like get stronger with my embouchure and stuff to make it sound good. But really, you're probably fighting your mouthpiece and reed combination more than you need to. So let's talk about what actually matters with the mouthpiece and the reed strength. So the mouthpiece is mostly flat, but if you look at a mouthpiece, it has a little bit of a curve to it towards the tip, whereas the reed itself is completely flat. So when the flat reed is laying against the slightly curved tip of the mouthpiece, we end up having this little bit of tip opening up here. That's the biggest part of the mouthpiece that makes a difference for reed strength, is this tip opening, and then also the facing length, which has to do with how close or far away the reed and the mouthpiece meet. But I'm going to focus on the tip opening because that's the sort of more focused on measurement of the mouthpiece. There's all kinds of other aspects of the mouthpiece with like the rails, the tip rail, the baffle, all of those things that make a difference in the sound and response and things like that, but have less impact on the reed strength that you need. So that's what I want to focus on for this. So if you have a mouthpiece that's really open, there's a lot of curve, there's a bigger tip opening, then you're going to need a softer reed, because the reed needs to vibrate against it and actually like flaps and closes on the mouthpiece and then opens as it's vibrating in your mouth. So you need a flexible reed if you have this bigger tip opening. So there's more flexibility there so that it can make that slightly bigger gap and vibrate and flex within that. So softer reeds are more flexible, so big tip opening, softer reed. Now, if you have the opposite of that, a smaller tip opening, less distance here, then you're going to need a firmer reed to vibrate against that. Because if you have the same soft reed that you put on the big tip opening, it'll start vibrating and it won't have the energy to spring back and open up the distance. And you'll end up getting that sort of pinched off, closed off sound, especially when you're trying to play high and loud. You'll find that the reed just sort of goes like and the sound is very thin and not very pretty. So when you have a closed tip, you need a little bit firmer reed. Now I want to give you some specifics for what actually is a closed or open tip mouthpiece, and also what is a soft or hard reed. So in the description of this video, I put some links. The first one is to the Van Doren mouthpiece chart. That's really nice because it has all of the measurements for the tip openings for Van Doren's mouthpieces, and Van Doren has a wide array of mouthpieces. They really have a ton of different models out there. So that's a great way to sort of look and get an idea of how these things are. And a lot of people have tried Van Doren mouthpieces, so you might have an idea if you like an M13 or an M30 or a B45 where you sort of like the Van Doren mouthpieces, so you can look at the dimensions of that if you're trying another company or brand's mouthpieces. The second link in the description is to a size comparison chart for reeds. And when I'm talking in this video and recommending reed strengths for the different tip openings, I'm going to be talking in sort of the Van Doren traditional, or that top line, which is just the traditional reserve clarinet reeds from D'Addario. And that's sort of the standard cut. That's your like Van Doren blue box or the most sort of normal reed sizing. But if you like the V12s or the reserve evolutions or whatever you like, you can see on that chart sort of where those lie. I will say that this doesn't have reed strengths for légères. I know a lot of people like légères and they're really popular, and I like them pretty well too. I will say that the European signature légères, in my experience, maybe run ever so slightly softer than a traditional. So maybe go down like a quarter strength for légères from the traditional. But in any case, you want to try sort of a lot to sort of find where it feels best for you with the mouthpiece. So these are just sort of broad recommendations. So as you can see in the chart, the mouthpieces sort of start off in the very closed range at the top for tip opening, right around 1 millimeter. It's also important to note in the Van Doren chart that the tip opening is measured in hundredths of a millimeter. So like the M13 is right around 100 hundredths. So that's actually 1 millimeter. It's good to have that comparison because a lot of other companies will just tell you the millimeters and will say like 1.1 rather than 110 like it is on the Van Doren chart. So starting off with the really small tip openings is going to be anything right around 1 millimeter, maybe up to 1.1 is where the cutoff's going to be for the medium strength, but it's going to vary from there. So like for a 1 millimeter tip opening, I would recommend around a size 4 reed. You could go up to 4.5 or down to 3.5, sort of feel what feels the best for you, but 4 is probably the generic recommendation for a 1 millimeter tip opening. And then you might go down to 3.5 as you move up the tip openings, all the way up to perhaps what I'm calling the medium tip opening, which is just at 1.1 millimeters or 110 on the chart. So for your medium facings, it's going to be like a 5RV is in that range, the M30 is in that range, and D'Addario's mouthpieces, the X10 is in that range. The Bakun Vocalise mouthpieces have been very popular lately, and that's the G model of the Vocalise is in that range. I didn't mention in the closed facing mouthpieces, that 1 millimeter range is going to be like the M13, the M15 from Van Doren, the X0, even the X5 is pretty closed from D'Addario, and then that's the Vocalise R model. And that's just sort of a couple brands. There's tons and tons and tons more brands of mouthpieces out there, but this is just to give you sort of an idea in terms of the more popular brands. Now jumping back to the medium facings, those M30 area ones, the 1.1 millimeter tip opening. For these, you need a slightly softer reed because it's a little bit more open. So I recommend average of 3.5 for this. You could go down to 3, up to 4, somewhere in that range will be good for your medium tip openings. And then finally going on to the large tip openings, I would put this at around the 1.2 millimeters. These are like your Van Doren B40, B45. The D'Addario actually doesn't have very many big tip openings, but it's all the way up in the like X15, the X25. Those are a little bit less common models of mouthpieces, but those are the bigger tip openings for them. And then the Bakun Vocalese H is the large tip opening there. And for these, I would recommend somewhere around a size 3 as well. Maybe up to a 3.5, maybe even down to a 2.5, but right around 3 I think is a good range for these open ones. I know a lot of professionals, they do have more embouchure strength simply because they play a lot and have more air support, and also like a little bit of a firmer reed, so sometimes they'll often actually do a 3.5 on even a B40. That's a pretty popular combination. So somewhere in that 3.5 range is where you're good to go for the largest tip opening mouthpieces. You can also see in the actual Van Doren chart in the description below, they also have the reed strength recommendations for all of their brands of reeds as well. So that's a little bit of a reed comparison there for you as well. So if you're on Van Doren mouthpieces and on Van Doren reeds, then that chart is the perfect resource for you for figuring out what reed strength should be working with your mouthpiece. But if you're on one of those other brands or models, you sort of have to do some comparing. Look at the tip opening, look at the reed comparison chart, and sort of find what the right tip opening and the right reed strength is for you and what feels best for you as well. And that brings me to really my final most important point, is it really is all about what feels best for you. This video and the reed comparison, mouthpiece comparison chart will give you some ideas about what generally should be good. If you find yourself playing on a B40 with a large tip opening and you're playing on a 4.5 reed and just banging your head against the wall about why this doesn't feel good or doesn't play right, that's probably your issue. Same thing if you're playing on like an M13 with a 3 or a 2.5, you may realize that there's something off there. But there's also a range for everything and for what feels good to you and for your particular embouchure, your level of air support. So it's all about experimenting and finding what you like. I always recommend experimenting across different brands to see what you like and across different sizes to sort of get things narrowed in. So my recommendation for you is to figure out what mouthpiece you have, figure out what the tip opening is for that mouthpiece, and then try something. If it's a small tip opening, maybe get a 4 and a 3.5 and see which of those that you like better. If it's a medium tip opening, maybe get a 3.5 and a 3, and maybe a 3.5 plus or even a 4, see what you like out of those. And if it's a large tip opening, get a 3, a 3.5, and maybe even a 2.5 and see what you like out of those. It's all about sort of the range and making sure you're in the right ballpark for your mouthpiece opening, but then experimenting around, trying those different brands and strengths, like I said, and seeing what feels the best for your particular anatomy and for the way that you like to play and the sound that you want to get out of the instrument. All right, I hope that helps give you some more information about how reed strength works. If you learned something in this video, then give it a like. And if you want more clarinet content and lots of fun videos like this, then be sure to subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell notification icon so you get notified every Saturday morning when I upload my new videos and every Monday when I go live for the live weekly warm-up. And I look forward to seeing you in another video.